Quick break, right back after this. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1935. That was the year that San Diego hosted the California Pacific International Exposition, where President Franklin Delano Roosevelt spoke the most memorable words about the rights of workers to organize. The goal of the exposition was to showcase San Diego and to boost the local economy, which had fallen on hard times during the Great Depression. The exposition was held in Balboa Park. Exhibits included history, science, industry, and culture. To prepare for the expo, improvements were made to the park paid for by the Works Progress Administration. The WPA was a New Deal era program designed to put people back to work on public infrastructure projects. The expo kicked off in May and ran for 377 days with a break during the winter months. More than 7 million people visited the park for the expo. Two of those visitors was President Roosevelt and his wife. The president had signed the Wagner Act, otherwise known as the National Labor Relations Act, which guaranteed private sector workers the right to join and form a union. The president spent part of his expo speech celebrating that achievement. He declared, quote, "A changing civilization has raised new problems with respect to the relationship between the employer and the employed. It is now beyond partisan controversy that it is a fundamental individual right of a worker to associate himself with other workers and to bargain collectively with his employer." President Roosevelt went on to acknowledge, quote, "New laws in themselves do not bring a millennium. The passage of the law helped to launch a new wave of union organizing across U.S. industry."
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the question now becomes, with Donald Trump at Walter Reed and his ability to lead uncertain, what happens to, well, the business of we the people? What happens to a coronavirus relief bill? What happens going forward? What happens to the Supreme Court nominee? Especially now that you've got a couple of senators who have now tested positive. Here to share some thoughts on what this might look like, I've asked a longtime Washington insider, our good friend Bob Weiner, to come talk with us, president of Weiner and Associates. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, it's a hoax. It's fake news. Trump's really still at the White House.
Is that what it is? Is that where you're going? Because I'll tell you. No, I honestly,
No.
last night when I first heard it, I'm going, I don't know that I buy it. I don't know that I believe it.
I know. But what is a hoax is how serious it is. Zeke Emanuel was just on Rachel Maddow saying he's got a 5 to 15% chance of dying, being that he's 70 plus geez, so are some of us. But he's in his mid-70s. He's obese. He's got fever. He's had fever all day. The White House has been hoaxing the American people, trying to say, oh, it's modest, it's nothing, oops, it's moderate, oops, it's more serious, oh, he's just going for a couple days. He's going to be at Walter Reed for probably 1 to 2 weeks. And if he's like Boris Johnson, he'll degenerate. Boris Johnson lucked out and stopped just short. This thing takes 2 weeks to get to the bottom and then come back up.
Right.
Boris Johnson stopped just at the point of having to have a generator, which gives you about an 80 to 90% chance of dying. And we'll see where Trump lands on this thing. But he's in serious situation now, and you can't tell me that Mike Pence hasn't been notified. They didn't tell us until, months later that Pence had been notified when he went to Walter Reed the last time. And a friend of mine, Rick, this is some news, who works as liaison to Walter Reed, and I won't tell you which department he's in because I don't want to get him up S's Creek, but he told me the doctors there were told that Trump did have a mini stroke. That's why they shot him out and shot him back, and why they gave him the mental test was to see if he was capable of anything.
Right. No, nothing surprises me, and the amount of lies and deception that have come out of this administration. The fact that my first reaction was this is a stunt is I think is the logical one. Now, as I said before, I don't wish him any harm. I don't wish him to die.
Yeah.
But to be honest, as he himself has even said, it's the elderly and people with comorbidities that are going to end up going. And I look at the path that Herman Cain took.
Right.
That was a whole month-long process.
That's right. I mean, this guy has dug his own grave. I mean, your first reaction should be sympathy, but in this case, I want to know, honestly, which of the kind of listeners you have and the friends that I have don't say, we don't want him to die, but we want him to suffer. This is justice for his throwing this hoax and throwing 210,000 now tonight deaths at the American people because he didn't take the steps and wouldn't do what the CDC says and wear a mask which protects you the 95%. He deserves the pain, not the death.
Yeah. No, I want, as I said at the beginning, I want him to recover, full speedy recovery, so we can lock him up and make him stand trial for his
I don't
crimes.
want full speed. I want him to go through the long, torturous recovery.
Okay, well, you're a little meaner than I am.
But the problem, Rick, is he's inflicted this on the American people. Think of all your friends and people. I have friends, and I run. I'm in Masters Track, and I've got a couple of Masters Track people who got this thing. I've got family who was in denial on the need for masks. Not Pat. My wife is a PhD, and she's brilliant, but, I won't say who the family members are.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there are people who bought Trump's BS,
Yep.
and they've suffered because of it, and suffered mightily, and our schools are suffering, and the 1/3 of small businesses that aren't reopening are suffering. The 30,000 airline pilots, employees that were fired today and yesterday are suffering. The economy as a whole is suffering. So, Rick, it's not just even the health, it's the economy, and I hope we get that message through because Trump had this little thing that, maybe he was 5 points up on Biden on the economy, but he's down below him on credibility on absolutely everything else. He doesn't even deserve the economy.
Nope. And this is one of those weird moments where, you go back to those Woodward tapes and
Right.
we now know that this was a conscious choice. This wasn't him just
Right.
being a doofus. This wasn't him being, we didn't know. They knew explicitly, and they chose to ignore it. And this is, it's, as I said earlier, it's almost like poetic justice that he's got it. And look, if someone had to get it, I'd prefer him than anybody else who tried to do the right thing, who tried to social distance, who tried to wear the mask, but had to go to work to
Right.
support their family, had to go and be around people who are idiot. Are these no mask, anti-mask, anti-vaxxer nitwits
Right.
who are making all the rest of us less safe and more in danger?
That's right. And by the way, let's make a little more news here. Hope Hicks, who gave it to him. Let's talk about why Hope Hicks left in the first place and was waved off with a love and kisses, friendly goodbye, and suddenly, because she had just testified in front of Mueller and told the truth. So she was dangerous. She was a spokesperson who could be telling the truth to Trump about Trump, and then Trump fired her because she was dangerous to him and gave her freedom so that she wouldn't be a White House employee. But then when Mueller's thing turned into nothing because he became the institutionalist instead of the real prosecutor in a lot of the stuff that mattered, and didn't bother asking about the finances that Trump had with Russia, and didn't bother doing the counterintelligence investigation that we all thought was happening. And nothing really happened out of Mueller other than a horrible, worst I've ever seen kind of testimony where he answered in staccato one-word answers and looked like he was afraid of himself. So once that happened, then he brought his good friend and lovely, wonderful woman, and God knows what else he's done with her, back. So that's how Hope Hicks got back.
Yeah. And now curious that she's the one who gave it to him.
Right.
Did you find his kind of pre-spin to be as interesting as I do, where he tried to blame the military and tried to blame law enforcement because they all love him so much they just want to grab him and kiss him and her, and did you find that to be as total BS as I did?
Absolutely. And 3 days ago when he's talking about masks hurt you as much as they help you and people touch their faces with them, and he was putting masks down right to the point of 3 days ago, and then he went to this fundraiser and he went to and exposed everybody else today and yesterday after he knew that he got it from Hope Hicks. I I don't have sympathy for this guy.
Well, I don't either.
I have none, zero.
No.
It can't come out of my bones to be sympathetic. I like some Republicans. I have some friends who are. Bill Cohen is a friend, and I brought Rob Portman over to the National Press Club, and some of they're honest people, except they're still acolytes. Not Bill Cohen, but most of them, Portman is still acolytes of Trump. But at least they're human, and remember what McCain did with thumbs down at the end or thumbs up, whichever way it was that kept the bill alive, the health bill alive. So there are a lot of decent Republicans. That's not the issue. This guy is a fraud, a con man, and when Bloomberg said it 4 years ago at the Democratic National Convention, people should have listened.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Now we also find out that at the Rose Garden ceremony where they marched out Amy Coney Barrett,
right.
We now find out that 5 people who attended that have now tested positive. That we know of. There are probably going to be more. Any chance of this?
She had it.
What's that?
She had it.
Oh,
She
yeah.
had it this summer.
She had it over the summer, but not at the Rose Garden.
Right.
Any chance of slowing that process down, of them ramming her nomination through?
That's what Schumer, I'm on Schumer's talk list for talking points. That's what Schumer is trying to do as leader of the Senate. It's what Pelosi wants to do. Lindsey Graham said, we're still on schedule, and he could lose his Senate seat, as can
Let's
about
hope.
8 others that are really, Tillis, by the way, just announced he has COVID tonight, and he's one of the ones at risk. And I think they should slow Barrett down. Schumer's point and other Democrats' point, but it's all Democrats' point, is that there's never been a hearing of a judge where you didn't do it in person. They're talking about doing it as virtual hearing now. I think they're going to do everything. I think they've calculated, Rick. This is the sad part. Yes, they should. Yes, the argument is there to do it, but the merits don't count. They may have calculated that they're going to get so creamed in the elections they might as well do a scorched earth policy and get what they can beforehand, and that includes the judge.
Yep.
So they're just going to give up a few points more in the election, grab the 9th judge, and take the hit. I think they may have made that calculation.
No, clearly. I mean, I've been saying that from the start. They're going to get their 6-3 majority, and I hope the Democrats find a spine, because now all bets are off. Rules don't matter anymore, and I hope they do expand the court. We're down this path where you've got the Republicans who continually and look, Democrats have done it too. You're breaking the norms. Now it's gloves are off.
Well, they should, but I am very distressed. I mean, we're all going to vote for Biden because you can't have Trump. So if you get a 90% improvement, but there are some things. I can't believe Biden is saying, I don't know about packing the court. I'm not going to give you an answer on that. He's being waffly on that.
Yeah.
And his first answer was, no, I'm not going to do it. Then he moved at least to waffling. So maybe he can be moved to actually doing it. I absolutely agree with you that maybe don't go to 3, which is a takeover, but go to 2 extra judges, because they stole 2.
Yep.
They stole this one, and they stole Obama's pick with Merrick Garland. So
No, I say you go to where you even the court, to where you actually have to have someone change their vote. You actually have to have a swing vote. I don't want to pack it to the point to where now
you're
you've
all
now.
right with 2 and not 3. Is that right?
Well, it'll be a 6-3 majority with Barrett on the court, right?
Right.
So if you
So that
put
would
3
make it
on the
6 to
court, you're
5.
even. If you put 4 on the court, now you've swung the
So
balance.
you do want 3. I don't think we're going to get that. I think the best we're going to get, if we get any, is 2. And yes, we should. But you know what? Here's the other thing. They can do all they want. If we have the Senate, the House, and the White House, they're going to fix Obamacare. They're going to put the stuff back in. They're going to fix the exchanges. They're going to make sure that Medicaid is put back in. Whatever the court puts down, they're going to do a legislative fix. It'll be first up. And the court has to give time. They can't make everybody with corona, the 209,000 people that died, right, but the 7 million that got it, they can't make all of them pre-existing conditions ineligible for insurance. They just can't do it.
Right.
Plus the 130,000, and how Trump can say it's not 100,000 people. Yeah, it is 130,000 people. That's the number of people that have pre-existing conditions that are now protected by Obamacare.
No, it'd be million.
130 million, excuse me. Thank you very much, people. So they can't not allow that. Rick, I remember when I hosted Price and I hosted Waldron. Price, who became HHS secretary, he was a congressman, and Waldron, when he was chair of the Republican campaign, I asked, what are you going to do? Because it's always we're going to repeal and replace. What are you going to replace? Okay, so if you replace it, What are you going to do about the children that are dropped? Oh, we'll put that back in. What are you going to do about the pre-existing conditions? Oh, we're going to put that back in. What are you going to do about the seniors' donut? Oh, we're going to protect the seniors and drug prices and donut hole. Well, by the time you're done, they're doing Obamacare.
Exactly.
So that's why they've never done a replacement, because it has to be Obamacare.
Well, they don't want to put anything on paper because then you can tear it apart. That's why Trump is protecting his secret plan so much.
No, it's coming out in 2 weeks. Again.
Yeah, again. I'm holding my breath.
Yeah, right.
That ain't happening. Now here's the other thing. Let's finish up on this line of thought, because now with Trump, there's a potential that he may be incapacitated for a bit of time, which means Pence is gonna ascend to the presidency.
Pardon deal.
Come again?
Pardon deal. If Pence is president for 1 second, he's going to strike the deal with Trump to be. Trump's going to strike the deal that I get pardoned.
There you go. Okay, that's interesting. But let's say he doesn't come back. Now we've got a new election with Pence at the top of the ticket. Does that make this any more competitive? Do you think, especially if he pulls in someone like Nikki Haley?
He's such a Trump acolyte. Well, and pick Nikki Haley for vice. Yeah, that's all possible. But Trump isn't going to let that happen. That's unlikely. I also think that the American people are so sick of the whole thing. Ford couldn't get reelected, right? So I think, first of all, Pence will have had to commit. Everybody will know that Pence will pardon Trump, and so that's going to knock him out. And everything else, there's so much on Pence. He knows everything. He was responsible and never got hit for all the Russia stuff. He was the head of the Trump defense on that, and so I just don't think that the American people will be sympathetic with Pence either with his positions, because he's been so supportive of Trump.
Right. So do you agree with the Politico article today that the campaign's basically screwed because this really refocuses all of the issues on this campaign back to the virus? Yes.
I think that's absolutely true. The only thing I'm thinking where it could move the other way is if this is the biggest fraud in the history of mankind, and Trump is pretending. I mean, he knows he's a losing dead duck. Maybe he thinks he's going to, in a matter of a week or two, come back and say, "I'm healed, I'm better," and see, and then try to get the sympathy vote and think he's going to get it that way. But I don't think even that's going to work. But that's the only way, the only conspiracy that I think. He's a TV reality show person to the end. And this could be the ultimate reality performance.
No, and that was right where my thought went. He's going to take a couple of days, maybe a week, and he's going to walk through it and say, "Hey, I went through it. It wasn't a big deal. Hydroxychloroquine."
Yeah.
And that's or now this magical experimental drug that they're giving.
Yeah, the one that actually does do a little bit of good. I watched Rachel tonight, and it has, it cuts your time of how much hospitalization in half. It cuts the seriousness in half in the 275 people that were tested with it, and it does seem promising.
Yeah.
At least it isn't hydroxychloroquine that.
Yeah, but here's the thing,
and
Bob.
It isn't remdesivir, and it isn't the other. It isn't the plasma, and the remdesivir actually does work. Steroids. There are some things that work.
Sure.
The medical science says work a little bit.
Yeah,
and
but
so maybe this is one of them, and maybe it'll help them.
Yeah, 275 people was tested on. Are you going to really jump right to the experimental drug on the most powerful person in the world
and give them the maximum dose?
Yeah, I'm struggling with that.
Which is what they did.
I'm struggling
so
with
that's what tells everybody, and it told Zeke Emanuel, this thing is more serious than anybody is letting on in his case.
Exactly. It just is what it is. But Bob, I appreciate the time as always. Love your insight. Thanks so much, man.
It's great, Rick. Take care. Thank you very much.
Good stuff.
Bye.
Our good friend Bob Weiner, Robert Weiner and Associates. Make sure you check out the work that they do. And look, as I said from the beginning, I wish the man no ill. I hope he recovers. I hope he recovers in time to lose the election and then to be perp walked right into the Southern District of New York, into the court, and then convicted and locked away. But I do wish him and Melania and all of the people infected a recovery. Quick break, right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. Did you enjoy a cup of coffee to start your day this morning? Well, on this day in labor history, the year was 2007. That was the day that Starbucks agreed to post information about union rights on an employee bulletin board at its store in Grand Rapids, Michigan. The International Workers of the World, or Wobblies, were attempting to organize the baristas at that store. The IWW accused Starbucks of interfering with the right to form a union. Starbucks management consistently points to better than average benefits provided for their employees as a reason against unionization. Starbucks management decided to settle the Grand Rapids dispute by letting the union information to go up before the case went through the full Labor Review Board process. This was just one incidence of the IWW's attempt to organize Starbucks workers. The IWW began its outreach efforts at Starbucks in 2004. One of the most pressing issues facing the baristas was scheduling. Like many in the service industry, they are subject to so-called flexible scheduling. Computer software programs create scheduling aimed at reducing labor costs. The result of these programs is often inconsistent and unpredictable hours. This scheduling makes it difficult for workers to establish a budget or plan for childcare. In 2014, the New York Times published a story on this kind of scheduling, featuring the difficulties faced by one Starbucks worker. In a study published also in 2014, they showed that Starbucks stores had 14% less employees on average in 2011 through 13 than they did in 2005 through 2007. Starbucks is not alone in using computer scheduling. Efforts to cut labor costs continue to have devastating impact on the day-to-day lives of workers in the service economy. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Suddenly, social distancing is our new national etiquette, abruptly supplanting handshakes, hugs, gatherings, and other forms of ingrained communal behavior by us humans. Awkward, disconcerting, isolating. Yet, as we frantically scramble to deter the health and economic ravages of COVID-19, we might benefit by pondering a self-inflicted cause of the contagion's disastrous spread: social distancing. For some 40 years, American corporations and governments have imposed economic, political, and social policies to distance the financial fortunes of the wealthy few from the well-being of the workaday majority. Consider the interrelationship of multimillionaires with the unseen kitchen staff of restaurants where they dine. To further enrich themselves, such multimillionaires have forced low-wage policies on food preparers, denied health coverage for them, and lobbied to kill proposals to provide paid sick leave. So, a kitchen worker coughs because he or she is infected with coronavirus, but doesn't know it, since the worker has no health care coverage for testing. Even though running a fever, the staffer must come to work or lose the job. A few days later, a multimillionaire sneezes because, well, COVID-19 doesn't distinguish between rich and poor. The very proposals that plutocrats have been blocking for years, like living wages, Medicare for all, home health care, and others, are exactly what a sane government would adopt to avoid the consequences of inequality that now confronts every American. This is Jim Hightower saying the actual disease that's forcing social distancing on our country is the widening separation of rich elites from the rest of us. And the cure is a national push for renewed social cohesiveness. The catastrophic spread of COVID-19 reveals a truth we too often deny. We are a species of completely interdependent beings.
What do the corporate powers from Wall Street to Walmart have in common? They hate the Hightower Lowdown. You can see why at www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the Department of Labor came out with their job numbers for September. Evidently, our economy added 661,000 jobs. Unemployment fell to 7.9%. This isn't quite the great bounce that they thought it was going to be, but I don't know, it's absolutely horrible. We gained about 66,000 manufacturing jobs back. That, not great. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the job numbers and, tell me if this is good, bad, what we've got to expect in the coming weeks and months. I've asked Ben Edgelori to come talk with us. He's a senior economist there at the Center for American Progress, AmericanProgress.org, their website. Benga, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me.
So is this a good number? Is this what we were expecting? Is this on par with what expectations were? Where did this fall?
So this fell below expectations. People were thinking that there would be about 800,000 or 850,000 jobs gained, and it was only 661,000. But I think the thing to really hone in on in this jobs report is what's happening with the participation rate. And are people sticking to the labor force? Are they sticking to the market? And what we find is that they're not, and especially it's falling harder on women. So 800,000 women dropped out of the labor force in the month of September. And this, not so coincidentally, coincides with the return to school and the fact that we have issues with remote education. So, because kids have to go back to school, but we're not going back in class, we're doing more remote, that labor now falls upon women. And so more women dropped out of the labor force. And that actually explains some of the drop in the unemployment rate. So this is actually not a good jobs report.
No, yeah, because I look at it, go 7.9, not horrible after what we went through. But to hear you explain this, now it makes perfect sense because, I've been wondering, how are families coping with going back to school? We're fortunate. My wife wasn't working outside the home before this happened, and she's not working outside the home now. So she has the ability to help them deal with the remote learning stuff. I don't know how, single parents, I don't know how, families who need the two incomes, I don't know how they're making it through this.
They aren't making it through it. That's the issue, and that's the point. And that's why it's kind of frustrating. Well, not kind of, it actually is frustrating that we haven't seen further fiscal relief since CARES back in end of March. That some of this, having state and local aid to help spend money on the education sector, or the $1,200 checks to help people pass through, or unemployment insurance to help people to spend, because what we saw in April and May is that the CARES Act spending actually helped prop up the economy. So there wasn't as much of a job loss, or there's better recovery because people were able to spend money. But now all that money is expired, and the rest of it's going to expire this month. And so there's no further relief, and that's going to help hurt these struggling families as we go through the fall.
I mean, this is one of those things where you look at the CARES Act, and there were some things in it I wasn't happy about. The $500 billion slush fund for corporate America I was not happy with. Mm-hmm. But, when you look at it on the whole, it did what it was supposed to do. As you've said, we could have had much greater job loss. It could have been much, much more painful. To steal a Pat Toomey phrase, we could have had that much harder down, which would have caused more pain, more misery, more hunger, more homelessness, more all those things. Because look, the foreclosure crisis is about to hit us fairly soon. As states like Florida have said, no, we're not protecting you anymore. Screw you, you're on your own.
Right, and so that's the thing is. What the CARES Act prevented in spring and early summer, we're going to be seeing now without any further fiscal relief. And so that's why, hopefully this jobs report can spur Congress. I know Mnuchin and Pelosi have been talking this week, and hopefully they'll be able to pass something that's substantial, because we're not going to get everything that we want or that we think we need, but as long as it's something substantial to help us continue weather this public health crisis.
Is it me, Benga, or is it, whenever corporate America wants something, whenever we need to bail out the banks, whenever we need to bail out, the wealthy, they never ask how much and how we're going to pay for it. They just go, here's the checkbook. But when it's, the average everyday working people, when it's people like you or me or our listeners, then we got to do things on the cheap. Because I'm looking at Mitch McConnell and the Republicans saying we're not spending anything over $1 trillion. Whereas the House passed the $3.4 trillion, the HEROES Act. There was a lot of aid in there for states and local government, a lot of aid for people who get sick, a lot of aid for testing, for all kinds of things that we need to get through this. And Mitch McConnell was at no point even willing to consider that. Even the White House is saying we need something more than $1 trillion.
Right, because right now the House passed another kind of like a scaled down version of HEROES. I think it's about $2.2 trillion. But one of the things I get frustrated with when people talk about the top line numbers is that the $2.2 trillion or $3.4 trillion or $1 trillion, that doesn't matter. The question is what's in it. How much is it for state and local aid? How much is it for childcare? How much is it to help small businesses? That's the thing that I look for instead of this top line number. Whether it's 2.2 or 3.4 or whatever. What is in there that's actually going to help the economy weather this storm? Because we are still in this storm.
Right. And for me, it's and much to your point. It's how are we going to help the people at the bottom, the ones who are going to be the most vulnerable as we go through this. I'm not worried about corporate America because look, this recovery that we've had, if you want to call it that, I got to think, and you're obviously the expert here. I got to think this is the most unequal recovery we've ever seen, and they're all unequal. But this one, by far, the worst because I saw a number the other day that said from the beginning of the pandemic till about somewhere in June, our heavy 600, our 600 billionaires saw their wealth increase by almost $1 trillion, while families across this country are losing their savings and soon to be kicked out of their homes, either evicted or foreclosed upon. So I can't imagine we've ever seen this kind of an unequal recovery, if we're going to call this a recovery.
I mean, that's always when I say the word recovery, I always do air quotes because it's not a real recovery. And a lot of times when you have a recovery, we have, for a certain segment, as you said, high-income people, wealthy people, is going up. And then for the rest, it's usually stagnant and flat. What we're seeing in this pandemic is that the people who would normally be stagnant and flat is actually going down. And so you can think about it in terms of, alphabet. You think about a K where you have some going up and some going down. And the best way you brought this up, the best way to kind of think about it is the housing market. You have that this is actually a hot housing market that people are buying and selling homes and doing really well. But on the other end, you have people starting to get evicted. And so within this quote unquote recovery, you have people who are doing really well, the wealthy top 1%, and then people who are struggling, who have lost their jobs, lost income, lost their house, and now are struggling to try to make ends meet.
Yeah, and it's just, again, one of these things where you go back to the stimulus and what's in it. For me, keeping people in their homes has got to be paramount. It's got to be one of the top line things. Because if we learned anything in 2009, 2010, is you can't allow people to be thrown out of their homes and leave empty houses around in communities because those communities don't come back.
Right. And that's the very important thing because when you have your home, then other things are going to be able to help out. But when you lose your home, then it's like, you rely on a lot of services, and then the recovery is much harder. Because if you lose your job, but you're able to stay in your home, then when the economy turns around, you're able to bounce back quicker. But if you get evicted, if you lose your home, that recovery is that much harder. And it's much harder for people to able to get back to where they were before, and then to actually experience economic mobility.
No, I mean, because I go through this and I look, I'm a working class guy. Everybody I know are working class people. They're living, paycheck to paycheck. Maybe some of them are lucky and they got a couple of paychecks squirreled away. But you look at the sad reality is most of the country is on the edge, or close to the edge, and to have Congress at this moment, this mired in division and this unwilling to do what we all, I think, know needs to be done, just sends an incredibly huge message to me.
It is, and it's been so frustrating because when the House passed the HEROES Act, that was May 15th. So we're talking about the spring, and you have this idea of like, okay, maybe it's the 3.4 trillion is a little too high, and they'll negotiate something around $2 trillion in June, maybe July. We went through July, we went through August, we went through September, and there was nothing. And what's the most almost insulting is that we have the House negotiating with the White House, and the Senate has been sitting on the sidelines as if there's nothing to do. And you see day after day stories of people struggling, people hurting. And it's not just, on certain communities. This is throughout communities of color, poor people, low-income people, small businesses. The number of small businesses that have been closing and filing for bankruptcy has been so many. And the fact that the Senate has sat on the sidelines and done nothing is just infuriating.
And you bring up communities of color. Some of the stories and studies that I've seen coming out here recently, they're the ones who are being hit hardest by this because most of the jobs that those communities do are those frontline jobs, those manufacturing jobs that haven't come back yet. I mean, you look at manufacturing. I guess the September report said 66,000 manufacturing jobs came back. That doesn't say anything about the nearly 650,000 factory workers who are still out of a job.
Yeah, and so while the positive number is a really small number, and the question is, what are going to be the trends? Because then you look at just yesterday, the airlines and a number of places have announced that they're going to have huge layoffs, which is going to have downstream effects in all these industries. And so while this jobs number wasn't good, given what's happening, it's going to be worse next month. And again, it's just there's so much data out there talking about how much people are struggling. And the fact that Congress isn't out there putting in more relief, bigger relief constantly is it's just maddening.
Yeah. And this is one of those moments, Benga, where you go, we had this little lull. And I was talking about this back in, April and May. We're going to hit a lull period, and that's the time to catch our breath and to really then put into place the things that we're going to need to go through it again. Because, everyone keeps saying, all the experts keep saying, sometime here in the fall, late October, November, into December, plan for another wave of this virus to come through. I'm hoping it doesn't happen, but I would have hoped that we would have taken these months that we've had so far, while there still are people suffering and struggling, and I get that, but it's going to get worse, and we've done nothing to prepare for it. That's the thing that infuriates me.
It is infuriating because we have done nothing. And the thing is, if you look at other countries around the world that actually clamp down on the virus, they're having their second wave or their third wave now, and we never had that. And so we've had examples of how to do this. And in fact, in April, early May, we were doing it. We were flattening the curve. We were working on it, and then we opened too early. And then even then, we haven't done what we're supposed to do, and there's evidence that we should do it. I mean, there's evidence now, research out there that shows that CARES worked, that PPP, with all the problems that it had, with all the struggles that it had, was helpful. And instead of looking at that and saying, okay, we need to do more of that, policymakers have just sat on their hands and said, we're not going to do anything. And what's even more infuriating, you would think, for a politician, it's in their interest to give people money the month before an election. Like, you want to be able to say, I passed this $2 trillion bill.
Yeah.
Let's make your life better. And they're not even doing that.
That's what's amazing to me. I mean, the House, and this is one of those moments where if the shoe was on the other foot, let's say Barack Obama was in the White House and we were in the middle of a massive financial crisis and they wanted to pass a big stimulus bill, the Republicans would hold out as much as, oh, wait a minute. That's what they did. Never mind. We've already seen that history. We saw that part of it. This is where the Democratic House is going, no, here's all the money you could possibly want to make you look better because we care about the people who are at the bottom. We care about our constituents. I mean, it really, to me, if you look at those two moments, I think it really shows, where each party stands.
It does. And it's one of those things where, I mean, we're talking about people's health. We're talking about people's lives. Over 1 million cases, over 200,000 people dead, and there's no end in sight. I mean, everyone's working. People who have the ability are working from home, and I don't understand why Congress is not doing anything. I mean, it's such a dire situation, and so many people are struggling. And then the worst part about this is that people are not going to recover. The economy may do better, people may get jobs back, but there's going to be permanent scarring from this. And that's the worry, is that 20 years from now, 30 years from now, I mean, we talk about the generation that went through the Great Depression, how they still keep, pennies in jars, even in their 80s. That's what our future looks like. Our kids are going to be doing these kind of things where there's going to be permanent scarring. The question is how deep are the scars going to be?
Yeah, I still do that though, Benga. I still have my rainy day fund and I somewhere hidden away just in case. Because, hey, look, what it showed us when this pandemic hit, the banks were closed. If you don't have something squirreled away, and this, I guess it's because I knew as a kid a lot of Depression era people. My mother worked in a nursing home, so I had the benefit of meeting a bunch of people in their 70s, 80s who lived through their main working life was the Depression. And the horror stories that they told, I guess, kind of, either scarred or imprinted on me. But I still do some of the things that they suggested.
But there's going to be a whole generation that's going to be like that now, because they're going to talk about what it was like to live through the pandemic. And they're going to talk about how Congress failed to act, and that what they had to do is figure out ways on their own of maintaining their home, of going to school. All these stories of people's struggle is going to last us for the next 100 years.
Absolutely, absolutely insane. But here's the thing. One of the things that I did agree with Donald Trump on is our trade deficit. And we could probably disagree on whether big trade deficits are good or bad. Personally, I think having an enormous trade deficit the size that we have is not good for us. We don't manufacture the things that we need. And I think that was highlighted in the fact that we couldn't get the PPE we needed because we don't make it much anymore. But in August, we had a record high, monthly trade deficit. This is another one of those moments, another failure of this administration and the structure of our trade deals to rein this stuff in. And we haven't brought back those manufacturing jobs.
No, we haven't. And trade is a complex topic, but there's a right way to do trade or a right way to think about it. And one of those things that we, as you mentioned, that there's a way of doing domestic manufacturing and revitalizing it. And so part of it is thinking about maybe there's some sort of manufacturing goods that are never going to come back. But we're the United States. We are innovative. We are ways of thinking about things. And there might be a new way of manufacturing certain goods. And that manufacturing can be a future, but we have to be proactive about it. We have to be thoughtful about it. We have to be innovative about it. And part of that is allowing people to not be excluded from certain markets. And so we think about the labor market and going back to the jobs day numbers where we have those gaps between black and white people, and those kind of things are harming ourselves. We look at education, educational inequality, and if we get rid of those disparities, we get rid of those inequalities, then that we could, help this economy thrive, be more inclusive, and then some of these people are going to be the ones who are going to be more innovative and help revitalize manufacturing industries.
No, you're right. I mean, inequalities is harming us in ways that we haven't thought of yet, because I fear that things get worse in the streets, and I fear we have much more chaos because of it. And I have a friend who grew up in Brazil, and he says you don't want to be Brazil. Even if you're doing okay, you're still always worried somebody's going to snatch your kids and hold them for ransom. You don't want to be that unequal. And sadly, I fear we're heading down that road, especially how unequal this so-called, quote unquote, air quotes, as you said, recovery has been.
Definitely. And that's why we have to really tackle this within the recovery. Because a lot of times people say, inequality is a problem, but let's let the economy recover first and then deal with inequality. We have to make tackling inequality the key in terms of doing the recovery. Because if we have an inclusive recovery, everyone gets a benefit, and that actually makes the broader economy stronger. That's what happened in the Great Recession, where we didn't have an inclusive recovery. We didn't focus on the inequality, and the inequality actually got worse. So that when this pandemic hit, it's actually making those inequalities worse. So you think about the differences in rural communities and urban communities, that there's already geographic inequality, and now this pandemic has made it worse because everyone has to work from home. But if you don't have strong internet access, if you don't even have internet access, you can't work from home. Your kids can't do education. If you're unemployed, you can't get on unemployment insurance because you have to apply online. And that's these inequalities that were existing at January 2020 are now getting even worse because of this pandemic.
Yeah. So let me ask you a last line of questioning then, because, I'm looking at hopefully a new administration in January who's going to inherit, the same problems, and even I would argue worse than they inherited back in 2009. What is the first line of attack? I mean, I've been saying, we need to do a lot of things at once. We need a good stimulus plan to help, lift up the bottom. I say we need to raise the minimum wage. I say we need to make sure people can get health care. We need to stop, the foreclosure stuff from going on, stop people from losing their homes. There's so much we need to do. But what do you think Biden and the next administration, hopefully if Biden is elected, what needs to be done? And the reason I'm using Biden, because I know the Republicans are going to be status quo. I know we're getting nothing out of them in the new year, and it's going to be pain and suffering. So I'm being a little hopeful that maybe there'll be a new administration, and maybe there's some things we can move forward on.
I would say all of the above. Everything you named, in my head I was just saying yes, yes, yes. I mean, we need all of it, because what we need to think about is we can't just sit there and say, okay, well, let's just get growth at 2.5%. Let's get unemployment down to 6%. We actually have to rethink what the economy looks like, who gets to participate, who gets to be a part of it. And so we have to actually create a new economy, an economy that doesn't create these unemployment gaps, an economy that doesn't create geographic inequality. Because what we need to do is when we remake this economy, reimagine this economy, what we need to think about is we need an economy that's resilient, that can bounce back. Because we're going to have future pandemics. We're going to have future recessions. The question is, can we bounce back from it? And so all the things that you mentioned, foreclosures, raise the minimum wage, health care, unemployment insurance, fixing unemployment insurance, all those things are going to be important. And, one even little example is having what we call automatic stabilizers, that if we have, unemployment or recession, then we have this automatic, let's say, direct check or automatic expansion of unemployment insurance that's tied to the unemployment rate. And so let's say, like, if we had this year, you would say, okay, when the unemployment rate gets below 8%, then the checks that were monthly become quarterly. And if we had that in place, the money wouldn't have expired July 31st. It would have kept going. And then this month, because unemployment dropped to 7.9%, then we would have spent less money in terms of direct checks, but we would have keep on doing it as the economy was bad, and we wouldn't have to rely on this Congress. We wouldn't have to be held hostage by the Senate. Yeah. And so those are all these things that we have to put in place to actually rethink how the economy works so that we're more resilient in future recessions.
All good stuff. One of the things, and it's a pet peeve of mine, so indulge me. But one of the things I wish someone in our house would do is go to move to not have unemployment benefits taxed. Thanks to Ronald Reagan, they started taxing unemployment benefits back in the 80s, and it's been a slap in the face ever since. So for me, I wish someone would say, we're not going to tax people who lost their jobs through no fault of their own and ended up taking a 50 to 70% pay cut. We're not going to slap them with that. I just think that's a little minor something that should be done. Just my pet peeve.
I hear you. And that's, again, rethinking the tax system. That's another thing we have to do. And so that, what do we tax? Who do we tax? Who do we enforce taxes on and do tax enforcement? Because that's something that came up this week with the president's tax returns, that because IRS has been defunded for the last 10 years, the tax enforcement has been on EITC filers and not wealthy people. And so that's, January 2021, hopefully we could fund IRS and do more enforcement of higher income tax avoiders.
Yeah, isn't it amazing? I mean, you just stop and think about what you just said. And I hope people understand what you just said, that the IRS is going after people who file for the earned income tax credit, that are given to low-income families who don't make a certain amount of money, so that brings them up to a certain standard of living. We're going after them full tilt boogie, and we're leaving the people like Trump and the billionaire class alone because, look, they can fight back and it's much more costly to go after them. So it's easy to kick the people who are down. It's easy to stomp on the downtrodden.
Exactly.
That is just disgraceful on every level. But Gbenga, I appreciate you taking a little time for us, sharing your thoughts. Good stuff as always.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much, Gbenga Ajilore. He's a senior economist there at the Center for American Progress. You can check out his work and the work that they do at AmericanProgress.org. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show for working people.
The Rick Smith Show.
I'd like to talk about climate change.
So would I. So would I.
Green News Report special coverage. A surprise discussion about climate change at the first 2020 presidential debate in Cleveland, Ohio.
All of those surprises and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Here's talking about the Green New Deal.
That
Dumbest,
is not,
most ridiculous,
that is not,
where airplanes are out of business, where two-car systems are out, where they want to take out the cows.
No, they don't want to take out the cows. This is your Green News Report.
And it's not $2 billion or $20 billion, as you said. It's $100 trillion.
No, it is not. You are so full of shit. Okay, Desi Doyen, It was a surprise. We were told what the topics would be for the first presidential debate. Climate change was not on Chris Wallace's list. But sure enough, it was a nice, long segment on climate change.
Yeah, with a record hurricane season and a record deadly wildfire season in the West, costing the U.S. hundreds of billions of dollars in economic losses in just the last month alone. Yeah, climate hawks had criticized debate moderator Chris Wallace for omitting that climate crisis from his official list of topics.
And apparently Chris Wallace heard the complaints.
Apparently he did. He surprised everyone with an 11-minute discussion on climate change. I believe it was the longest and most substantive on climate ever in a general election presidential debate.
I believe you are correct.
That's not saying much, of course, but it was still pretty good. But before we turn to the debate, first, keep in mind that climate scientists say humans are responsible for all of the global warming observed since the 1950s. And they say that swift, sustained action will be required over the next 10 years and beyond if we are to have a chance at avoiding the worst impacts of man-made climate change. Wallace began by noting the record wildfires in the West, Trump's withdrawal from the Paris Climate Accord, and his rollbacks of President Obama's environmental and climate regulations. Trump conflated climate change with air and water pollution, raising the question of whether he even understands what man-made climate change is. And of course, he took credit for Obama's emissions-cutting policies.
What do you believe about the science of climate change, and what will you do in the next 4 years to confront it?
I want crystal clean water and air. I want beautiful, clean air. We have now the lowest carbon. If you look at our numbers right now, we are doing phenomenally.
He doesn't know the difference between pollution and carbon emissions, does he?
On the third attempt, Trump finally answered.
Do you believe that human pollution, greenhouse gas emissions contributes to the global warming of the planet?
I think a lot of things do, but I think to an extent, yes. But I also think we have to do better management of our forests.
To an extent, yes. He sort of agrees, yes. But then we have to take care of our forests somehow. That's climate change?
Which it is driven by climate change, but no.
It doesn't cause climate change.
Wallace pressed on.
But, sir, if you believe in the science of climate change, why have you rolled back the Obama Clean Power Plan, which limited carbon emissions in power plants? Why have you relaxed?
Because it was driving energy prices through the sky.
Which, of course, is false. Renewable energy is now on par with or cheaper than fossil fuels for electricity, and Trump's rollbacks of mileage and emission standards for cars will actually result in more traffic deaths, not fewer, as Trump falsely claimed. Wallace then turned to Vice President Joe Biden. He gave a great summary of Biden's comprehensive climate policies, but unfortunately couched it in conservative false framing of climate action versus the economy.
You propose $2 trillion in green jobs. You talk about new limits, not abolishing, but new limits on fracking, ending the use of fossil fuels to generate electricity by 2035, and zero net emission of greenhouse gases by 2050. And it includes upgrading 4 million buildings, weatherizing 2 million homes over 4 years, building 1.5 million energy-efficient homes. So the question becomes, I think some people who support the president would say that sounds like it's going to cost a lot of money and hurt the economy.
What it's going to do is going to create thousands and millions of jobs. It's going to make the economy much safer. Look how much we're paying now to deal with the hurricanes. We spend billions of dollars now. Billions of dollars on floods, hurricanes, rising seas because of global warming. There's so many things that we can do now to create thousands and thousands of jobs. Not only not costing people jobs, creating jobs.
Biden did miss an opportunity to explain his plans for a just transition for fossil fuel industry workers and low-income households in transitioning to a clean economy. Polls show that the vast majority of voters want climate action. And for the first time in a general election presidential debate, Americans finally got to hear a little of what the candidates will do or not do about the climate crisis.
It was an insane debate, but who would have thunk with Donald Trump in a debate and Chris Wallace of Fox News hosting that we'd have an actual discussion about our climate crisis, no matter how insane that discussion actually was. For much more on this and all of the stories we couldn't cover today because of it, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the breaking news of the last half hour, evidently Kellyanne Conway now reportedly has the coronavirus. Their teenage daughter put it out on TikTok. She has now confirmed that she has the virus and that she's feeling okay, mild. Again, I love all these people who have it. It's just mild, little light cough. Everything's going to be fine, going to be good. We didn't do anything wrong. And there's this great picture going around from the Rose Garden, or what we're now calling the super spreader event, because now we know at least 6 people who have contracted the virus in the Rose Garden event. Nobody wearing masks. Yeah. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the big stories of the day. I've asked our good friend, former congressman, and one of my favorite political analysts, Bob Ney, to come talk with us. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you, Rick.
Don't need a mask, Bob. Don't need that stinking mask. You're outside. You're outside. Be fine.
I think if people, obviously, if they wear masks, they decrease greatly. If both are wearing masks, the chances of getting this, and it's just the way it is. And I understand people don't like the masks, but they do help. There's no question about it.
Yeah,
now,
but
there's
I just
certain
tweeted
outdoor events where you're socially spaced. That might be a different world, but that's,
Exactly. I just tweeted out a picture that, someone had put together and, put out the color, did some color and some black and white version of it. And all of the people in the Rose Garden are shoulder to shoulder. There's no social distancing. They're literally packed in, and I think there's 1 or 2 people wearing masks. The rest of them, they're just right next to each other, all surrounded by Mike Lee, and now we find out Kellyanne Conway, who was sitting right behind Melania. How do we know Hope Hicks is the one who gave it to him?
Oh, I don't think we will know. I mean, who knows? It could have been her. It could have been from then. I mean, you just don't know.
So the question then becomes, and I wanted to get some of your thoughts on this, does it seem a bit extreme that if it's, the president's having light symptoms, mild symptoms, that they would take him to Walter Reed and give him an experimental drug?
I was a little torn on this because when I first read it, I was talking to a couple people, and we kind of both thought there's something going on, because why would he go to Walter Reed, or why would he want that photo op, frankly, if he's not very sick going to Walter Reed. But I think probably the physicians, this is just my guess, is that the physicians wanted him under some observation for maybe 2 or 3 days. I'm not sure if he wanted to do it, because definitely he should be back in the White House, running the White House like the president of Brazil, was doing his job, quote. Otherwise, he doesn't do anything for 10 days, and that is obviously not good. Now, that's assuming he's okay, with that scenario. So they're going to set up this temporary working office. There'll be some photos of it, et cetera. But I was surprised that it would be for a 3-day period, because I'm assuming with this disease, with this infection, that within a couple of days, and I could be wrong, I don't know, I'm not a doctor, but within a couple of days you sort of know that it's going in a worse direction, or it's a mild case.
Yeah, well, the doctor we just spoke to in the last hour said usually how it's been working out is like the 6th to 8th day, that period right around there is when it's really bad. If we're led to believe that he got it from Hope Hicks on Wednesday, this is an awful quick move.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, so I'm thinking it's a little bit worse than it is, and then all these the doomsday scenarios start popping into my head. Who's got their hands on the wheel? What do you start looking at the 25th Amendment? Does that come into play?
I think that obviously he's got to get very, very bad and be on a ventilator or something for that, frankly, to happen. And I know that there's all kinds of stories. There was a couple stories that the White House is in the throes of chaos, and I don't think so, frankly. Him not there right now.
I think they're always in chaos.
Well, that's what I'm trying to politely say, I guess, because, it's going to be probably a little bit calmer in a sense, and Pence is there. So unless he's, infirmed on a ventilator and something happens. Now, if that happens, then that'll be a whole different subject. I think that Biden probably going to the political side of this, because we wish the president and the first lady, all the best in this to have a good recovery. I think that Biden did a good thing. He pulled right now.
Yeah.
He pulled immediately the negative ads, and you're going to have some things happen like Zara Rahim, and she did a really, really dumb thing and said she hopes he dies, and she had worked for Obama and Hillary. So you're going to have, now obviously Obama and Hillary, I would assume, are going to denounce that,
Absolutely.
as we speak, which is what should be done. So citizens saying something, or whatever they say, but people who were, activists in the Democratic side need to obviously watch what they say right now, because that will garner on a political basis, not just that it's not good to say it, but on a political basis, that'll garner, frankly, some sympathy for the president. Now, I do believe, Rick, that, look, a lot of votes are cast, a lot of minds are made up one way or the other on this. But if it's a tight race, how the president handles this is going to shed some maybe votes on some of the percentage left, and frankly, how he doesn't handle it may also do the same thing. And again, Biden's been around a long time, so he did it as something immediately that he needed to do.
No, he was
smart.
He was smart to pull the attack ads, and you keep campaigning, you keep doing what you're doing.
Right.
But you focus it on what you're going to do to clean up the mess so that nobody gets COVID. Because I think I think the Politico article that came out today that said this is probably really bad for Trump because it refocuses the virus and makes it one of the main campaign issues now. I think it really does bring it back into focus because I was under the thought process that probably the last person who would get it would be Trump because he is so insulated and they do so much testing and they do so much to keep people away from him, especially the dirty unwashed masses in his crowds. That he would be protected. The fact that he's got it, and I'll say it again, as my son always says about my oldest daughter, it's not that she's useless. She serves as a bad example. This serves as a bad example.
Right. I think it shocked people, frankly, that he got it because, he can say during the debate about masks or whatever he wants, but in all reality, for the most part, he's not in through the crowds or anything like that, And so, I was surprised, frankly, that he had gotten it.
So let me ask you this, because last night when I heard, my immediate thought was that this is a stunt. There's just no way that this is some kind of, and I guess it's just been trained over these last 3.5 years to question everything that comes out of this administration as less than factual. I've now moved away from it because look, he's now in the hospital. There's now this talk of experimental drugs and who knows. But did you give it any thought? I mean, you're usually the most level-headed guy I know. So any thought that this could have been some kind of a weird stunt?
No, I really didn't. Just never gave it a thought because if it is, it can be found out and he's done. So that's why I never gave it a thought.
Okay.
And also, because a couple of friends of mine, I'm laughing about this. They're like, "Well, he wants to get out of the debates." I said, "Please, he loves that.
No,
he doesn't care what they say about him. He loves it. He doesn't care what they'll do next debate to do rules. He'll do what he wants." So, yeah, I said this is not a tactic to get out of debates. I think it's a downside for him. I mean, he has to handle this perfectly, do his job, et cetera, and I'm not sure that can happen. So I think it's a downside. So, yes, this one I didn't think that there was any kind of, anything of that nature. Just like people had said that Biden's people were looking out of the way out of the debates before they debated. I never believed that either.
No, I never believed that.
Yeah.
But, you know, my mind immediately went to he's been tested positive. He was on Fox News. You know, a couple of days he's gonna say, "Hey, I beat this. It was no big deal. I've had, you know, like someone sent me one of these memes that says, you know, I've had hangovers worse than COVID." You know, so it was going to be that kind of a mindset. You know, I'm a tough guy and I got through it, and that kind of thing. And maybe it was the hydroxychloroquine or bleach or whatever, but you know, pimp some product along the way. But you know, I got to be honest. I allowed myself to go to that place.
Yeah, I didn't go in that direction at all because I thought he'd be found out too easily, and But I'm thinking, you know, 3 days in the hospital. This shocks me. I mean, I could see Trump saying, "Okay, one day you take a look." 3 days in the hospital. I'm just surprised. Now, containing him in the White House, nobody comes and sees him unless they're distanced and they have a mask, etc. I could understand that type of thing. Then he's the working president. But Rick, this makes me suspicious that it's a little bit worse because I just can't imagine Trump letting them have him there 3 days.
Nope, I'm right there with you.
They're doctors, the best in the country. One day you look at it and do some tests, maybe two, but the 3 day thing just, I don't know, it doesn't sit well in my mind.
Yeah, as soon as they came out with, he's going to go to Walter Reed for a few days, you go, this is more than mild.
Right.
You know, this is more than a light cough.
Well, and also he is in the category, you know, with his weight, with pre-diabetes, and also, frankly, we don't know what else because, you know, his medical records aren't completely, you know, transparent.
Right.
So he's got, you know, some preconditions that could make this a little bit worse for him, and you know, than we thought.
So now it's your view that he can be working while in Walter Reed, or let's say this goes longer than a couple of days. It's your view he can keep working.
Yes, unless his illness takes hold. But yes, they have a working type of office for him over there, and you'll see some photo ops.
Oh, I'm sure.
Definitely, you'll see some photo ops and things like that.
So if there's ever a deal on the stimulus, maybe it gets to him, we get it signed, we get it moving. If there's you know, some other official business that needs to be done, there's someone manning the wheel.
Yes, they can do it. Now, if he stops tweeting at 1 a.m., then I'm going to be suspicious that he's not feeling well. I mean, you know, he does tweet. I mean, I know he's resting, but he still tweets. But yes, he can conduct official business while he's there quite easily. Again, I was just, you know, medical was one thing, but again, I was just a little bit taken back that it was a 3 day deal.
Okay. The last tweet he put out was like 4 hours ago, and that was only one little video of him, you know, rambling on. So, like I said, I wish him the best. I hope he recovers, full recovery, so that we can, on the other side of the election, we can arrest him, perp walk him, try him, and jail him.
I mean, Rick, this is surreal. If HBO sat you and I down and said, "Okay, we want you to put a script together," and you and I came up with this during an election, they would throw us out and say, "Okay, you two are canceled. You're idiots."
Dude, 2015 forward, you couldn't write.
Really?
You know, yesterday we had Billy Ray on. He wrote and directed the Showtime miniseries, The Comey Rule. And you know, you just look at that script and you go, you could have never written that. You know, a couple of years beforehand. There's just no way that any of it would be believable, and yet it's all factual. It's all what has happened, and we're in really weird times.
Well, we are. Oh, by the way, a show that is coming soon is called The Silent Kingdom, and it's by Alex Gibney.
Okay.
And that is something to watch. It's about the death of Khashoggi and the Saudi royal family, and it's going to show a lot. So I just wanted to mention that. Very, very good to watch.
We'll have to make sure that we look for that, and maybe try and reach out to them to get somebody on to talk about that as well.
Sure.
Because you know, these are important moments. I mean, you know, I watched the Comey Rule, and you know, there's the one scene where you know Trump and Comey are having their little private dinner, that is creepy as hell.
Uh-huh.
And
Right.
I can't imagine being in that situation. But anyway, let me ask you this, because let's say, I'm thinking worst case scenario. Let's say something does go south. How seamless is Pence taking over, and then campaign wise, becoming the nominee and picking a VP? A lot of people are thinking Nikki Haley. Some people threw out Ivanka. I'm curious how you would see that play out with this, 32 days left till Election Day?
Right. Well, both political parties have the ability to select someone. So Pence is not, Trump would have to step down. There's two differences. Trump would have to step down as president, and Pence would become the president. If Trump was incapacitated and is not technically stepping down, or has stepped down and Pence became president, that doesn't mean that Pence would be the nominee because the party picks. Now, most likely he would have to be the nominee whether he became president or not. But the party does pick, so they would have to do that obviously very rapidly. The thing I would throw out there, though, is what do you do with ballots that are already out there that have the name Trump? So I guess they'd have to figure a way that whoever they pick, if you want to vote for him, you vote for Trump. I mean, I'm trying to run this through my mind, how that works.
So it wouldn't automatically be Pence who ascends to the number one, since he would be the president. They would be able to choose somebody else then.
They could.
Wow.
But let's say that they take Pence. I would highly doubt that it would be Ivanka. I would think it would have to be Nikki Haley.
Yeah.
I just can't, I can't imagine that they would pick Ivanka.
No way in a cold day.
No, Nikki Haley. It would have to be.
Oh, certainly. I mean, and I got to tell you, from somebody who likes watching debates, that would be a hell of a debate.
Oh, sure. Nikki Haley is, she's seasoned. I've been looking forward to the debate with Senator Harris and Pence. I really have.
Me too.
Because Senator Harris is a very, very good, articulate debater, and so I've been looking forward to that. But yes, Nikki Haley, that would be a pretty good debate with she and Senator Harris.
Yeah, so this refocuses next week's debate of the VP debate, because Pence may be presidential material.
Right, and look, again, I think that the rational people wish the president well and recovery, but you never know. You don't know with this disease what happens. You don't know. I mean, there could be a scenario where he is going to have problems. We really don't know.
No, I mean, I look at Herman Cain, and I use him as the example. It was a month-long process, and they kept saying, "Oh, he's doing fine. Everything's doing well. We're doing some new treatments," and it turns out he didn't make it.
It was shocking. Herman Cain's death was shocking.
And I see, this kind of possibly going the same route. I mean, the same kind of comorbidity, morbidities. Maybe Trump with a little bit more of a weight problem than Cain had. Still, being older guys should have wore the mask.
Yeah, you never know how this is going to go. Like I said, people are wishing for the best, but you don't know. And if it happens, as a country, we'll deal with it.
Yeah, we'll deal with it. Bob, as always, I appreciate the time. Great stuff. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Rick. Thanks.
Our good friend Bob Ney. Look, like you said, we wish him well. At least I do. So that, like I said, we can arrest him and try him. Quick break. Right back.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1935. That was the year that San Diego hosted the California Pacific International Exposition, where President Franklin Delano Roosevelt spoke the most memorable words about the rights of workers to organize. The goal of the exposition was to showcase San Diego and to boost the local economy, which had fallen on hard times during the Great Depression. The exposition was held in Balboa Park. Exhibits included history, science, industry, and culture. To prepare for the expo, improvements were made to the park paid for by the Works Progress Administration. The WPA was a New Deal era program designed to put people back to work on public infrastructure projects. The expo kicked off in May and ran for 377 days with a break during the winter months. More than 7 million people visited the park for the expo. Two of those visitors was President Roosevelt and his wife Eleanor. As part of his trip, the president gave a speech to 60,000 people at Balboa Stadium. Earlier that year, the president had signed the Wagner Act, otherwise known as the National Labor Relations Act, which guaranteed private sector workers the right to join and form a union. The president spent part of his expo speech celebrating that achievement. He declared, quote, "A changing civilization has raised new problems with respect to the relationship between the employer and the employed. It is now beyond partisan controversy that it is a fundamental individual right of a worker to associate himself with other workers and to bargain collectively with his employer." President Roosevelt went on to acknowledge, quote, "New laws in themselves do not bring a millennium. The passage of the law helped to launch a new wave of union organizing across U.S. industry."
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So clearly we're going to be talking about the president and Walter Reed over the weekend. As I said, I wish him the best. Hope he gets out so that he gets back on the campaign trail at some point and then lose badly come November 3rd. But, this is one of those moments, as I spoke earlier about the moneyed class, the wealthy who have been backing him. And I had this weird conversation today where, this person that I was going back and forth with said that, Donald Trump's going to be the last person that the peasant class elected as president. And I'm going, no, I'm not quite getting that, considering he lost the popular vote and considering that it was mostly moneyed interest that pushed him. Granted, there were a lot of working class people who voted for him. But it was the moneyed interest who really, they pushed him over the top. He had a lot of billionaire backers. And a lot of them have shown up to his fundraisers, which is why the thing in New Jersey is so interesting, watching some of the freak out coming out of that Bedminster fundraiser they had. Because you may remember, I guess it was about a month ago, I talked about one that was in Cleveland. And I have a fairly well-to-do uncle who I thought for sure was going to go because he's a huge Trumper. It was something like $6,000 to walk in the door. It was $35,000 to take a picture with him, and it was $100,000 to sit at the round table. And as I understand, there were like 30 people who showed up for the round table. Those aren't the peasant. That's not the peasant class. And it was at a private club, private gated community club that, one of the most expensive and exclusive in the greater Cleveland area. And it was one of these moments where you go, these are the people who are the wealthy and the powerful. They're the ones, they're the deciders. They're the ones who our government has decided who's gotten what. And they get that they spend $100,000 to get Trump's ear for, I guess it was an hour-long round table. They spend $100,000 to get his ear for 5 minutes so that maybe they can plant a seed in the back of his pea brain that would say, hey, I can deregulate this, and they can make 100 times that amount. But now you got these people in Jersey who are going, uh-oh, I paid probably that $100,000 or $250 for Jersey and got to sit at the little round table, and I'm sure they wouldn't allow anyone to have a mask on. And now they're freaking out because, hey, was I exposed to it? Because guess what? What you find out is a lot of the folks who have that kind of money and that kind of wealth and power fall into that same range. And I always find it ironic that people say Trump isn't one of them. Trump is part of the oligarch class. Now, granted, they do keep him at an arm's distance because he really is kind of a crummy businessman, and his tax returns have kind of shown that. The fact that you lose money in a casino, kind of interesting. Especially at a time when it was a monopoly. Again, I'm not judging too much. The hundreds and thousands of stories of him stiffing contractors out of payment, they're just abound. All of that aside, he's still in that class. And I just find it ironic that people go, oh no, he's just like us. When the reality is he has no idea what the struggle of the average American is. And, I'm kind of sad now to see that there probably won't be any more debates. There probably won't be the town hall, which is coming up on the 15th. That's probably not going to happen. Maybe, but, I'm sure they're going to say too soon, especially if he does get a little sick. Because that was the town hall where he's going to have to actually look average people in the eye and answer their questions and try to show some bit of empathy, which he doesn't possess. So from this point forward, it's going to be an interesting little campaign because where do you go? Especially if Trump takes a turn for the worse. And like I said, I'm not hoping for it. I wish him a recovery. But it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. It's going to be a very, very interesting weekend. But the message out of this that I hope people take from this, aside from all the heated rhetoric and aside from all of the arrows, is that this is deadly. This is serious. Stay the hell away from each other. When you are near people, put on the damn mask, wash your hands, because this is serious. And they knew it was serious. And they chose exactly what they did. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.